Welcome to Rock Your Talk. I am Leisa Reid here from Productive Learning and founder of Get Speaking Gigs Now. And I am here for our expert interview series with Jamie Now. She is from Project Access. She's also a member of our Conscious Leadership Circle at Productive Learning. And I am so excited that she's here. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, you and Project Access. Like, you guys are doing a lot for the community.
Thank you. So I am a writer and a people person by nature, which got me into marketing a long time ago in my career and business development, and found myself several years ago really wanting to combine my personal passion on the side for nonprofit work with my career, and now I'm at Project Access. Really passionate about our mission. We serve low-income families and seniors on site in their housing properties. So we eliminate the barrier of transportation and childcare and cost by bringing services that they typically have a hard time accessing right to them in their backyard. And that's more relevant than ever right now. So this is a good time to be talking about what we're doing.
It is, and it's such an amazing service all the time. And then now when I'm sure you're seeing some shifts in the marketplace for yourself and for your the consumers using your services, because wow, we're really up against some interesting times. But that doesn't erase that just sometimes people are up against hard times on the regular basis. So I'm glad that you're here, and I know you have some really a unique perspective in terms of the front lines of nonprofit professionals. Like, you're right there in it, right? And this task. So what, I know you had a couple of tips, or like, I think 3 tips for the nonprofit people on the front lines and what they could do during this time. What's your first tip you're going to share with us today?
Awesome. I'm so excited to dive in. So my first tip for people who are on the front lines or managing people on the front lines is really to adapt quickly. This is the time that we have to empower our people to rise to the occasion. So we've got this unique situation where the residents, or I guess for everybody else, for the clients that we serve as a whole in the nonprofit world, they already had a need before this happened. And
Yes.
For a lot of the people who were in low income situations or in situations where they were living paycheck to paycheck, or they had any kind of instability in their life, it's just gotten exacerbated by this pandemic, and especially by the peripheral economic effects. And so the need that we've all been in business to create or to meet has grown very quickly. And at the same time, the needs for our organizations have also shifted. So hopefully all the other nonprofits out there have also built a crisis response team, and you've got high-level individuals from all the different departments in your organization really focused on the operational well-being of your organization, your sustainability, and then what the future is going to look like for you when this does subside. So that means the need has grown in the communities that we serve, but our top-level people are also being pulled in a different direction, working on responsibilities that they don't normally have. So there's this gap. We've got to really allow ourselves to let go of control and let our people rise up to meet the needs that are there. So my recommendation is to focus on 2 things. One is to make sure that you as a leadership team or a crisis response team have really determined and clarified what your org-wide priorities are during this pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then make sure you communicated that effectively to your teams, and let the non-essential work go to the back burner for right now, because there is stuff that does not need to happen for 2 months, and you'll survive, and you'll be able to focus more on meeting the need in the community. And then 2 is increase your delegation and increase your support. So clear your to-do list by shifting that to your teammates, and then make sure that you're showing up to really support them as they learn to take on new tasks that are outside of their comfort zone. They're going to make mistakes, and that's perfectly fine. This is the best time for anybody to be making mistakes, because there's so much grace in the community, and everybody knows we're doing the best with what we can, or with what we've got. And now is a great time to let your staff, show up for this and feel empowered in this situation. When there's a lot of negativity going on around us, you can give them this empowering opportunity to rise up and try out new skills or share skills with your team and your organization that they've had in a side gig. But it's really a time for your team to grow and learn, and for you to be playing that support mechanism and make sure they know you're there. So when they make a mistake, that you're going to be right next to them, helping them figure out how to solve it, and you're going to help them figure out a solution. But to make yourself available for that, you've got to be shifting some of the responsibilities off to them. So those are my two big things. Make sure your priorities are clear and that everybody knows them, so they have permission to shift non-essentials off their own plates, and then let your team take on bigger responsibilities than they've ever had and show up to support them in that. So that's
yeah. And it sounds like in that there's some space or intention around having really transparent communication with people, because even having that conversation of saying, I know that, 2 weeks ago, this project was a priority, but now that has shifted. And even though we've been saying that for however long, can we agree? And, can we agree that we're going to shift the priority to Y, and that tomorrow it might be Q, there's just like, let's all agree that we are going to be flexible because it's shifting on the regular basis. And so even having that type of transparency, and it sounds like what you're saying is like a renegotiation of responsibilities of like, I know I've never asked this of you before, but it hasn't been a need, and now it is. Can I rely on you? Is this something that you could take on? Who could take this on? And I think sometimes as leaders, we could tend to take it all on and not want to ask more of our team. I don't know if you're finding that. Yeah. So I heard you say like the delegation. So it's like even renegotiating that of like, I have a hard time sometimes leaders have, I have a hard time delegating, but that's something that I'm going to need help with. Who could support me on this? Or can I, make sure and check in with you about other tasks that you might be able to take on. So even just having the communication before the communication can set some new ground rules, and sounds like really, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, Leisa, so I participate in a conscious leadership circle with the Productive Learning Group. And one of the things that my circle mates have helped me work on is delegation, because I tend to come into the situation and be like, oh no, there's more than we can handle. I want to protect you from that. So let me hold on to these things and do them ourselves. And I think that's a tendency in the nonprofit world, is we're all in this work because we're helpers.
Yeah.
But we have to shift our mindset and be really intentional about looking at our workloads right now as opportunities to empower people to learn and grow, instead of letting any of that extra workload feel like a burden. And I think what you're saying is spot on. Like, it comes down to how you communicate it too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I prioritize.
Yeah. I'm so excited. Yeah, I think that's neat too, because what you said in empowering those other people, because we don't think of it in time necessarily of like building up our resume in the middle of a position that we love, but in a way, like if you're not, it allows for you to say, gosh, I achieved that project, or I was asked to be on this task force, or I took on a responsibility that was different than I had ever done. And that can feel really exciting and reinvigorating for somebody, especially if they've been kind of doing the same thing over. Now, there's people who, have less tolerance for change. And so all of these tips, of course, are going to be filtered through who your audience is.
Yeah.
But it's still then with those folks who are less tolerant of change. We all have issues with change, but we have a scale, of course. You can still have that conversation. Like, I get that there's a lot of change right now. It's going to be unsettling. What do you need from me, or how can I help support you, this, employee, on all these changes that are coming up? Is there a way in which you would work best? So
that is the perfect segue, actually, to my next tip, because You know, we're all getting this competing information about how we should communicate and when we should communicate and how much we should communicate. And I just kind of want to refocus that conversation and say that we all know that communicating consistently and clearly is important. But right now, I really think that it's how we show up for the communication that's making the biggest impact. So with all of our stakeholders too, but I'll start with our staff since we're talking about that already.
Sure.
And when we show up to communicate, we have to not only be more present than we're used to being, but we have to be we have to be aware. Like, you can't come to the table anymore and just be present. You've got to be aware of what you're bringing to the table right now. So when you go into those communications with your staff because you're ready to shift some responsibilities, or when you're having the conversation with your fellow leadership team to discuss what priorities are and what can sit on the back burner that might impact somebody else's department or somebody else's workload, you've got to know what energy you're coming to that with. Are you coming to this conclusion out of fear? Are you coming to this conversation with a fear that this person's going to say something different than what you want to hear from them? And really just be prepared, like do the work you need to be aware of what you're bringing to the conversation so that you can be present. Because when you're present, you're doubling down on listening, and it gives you the opportunity to notice how people are responding to the change that you're asking for from them. And right now, I feel like that's so much more important than any of the content of our communications. And that doesn't just apply with our staff, it applies with our donors, which we're all getting 1,000 different messages right now about how to talk to our donors and if we should or if we shouldn't. And I really think it's about connect with them, but listen. Find out where they're at. Just because they've been able to fund your organization in the past doesn't mean that they don't have challenges in their own life right now, or that their wealth isn't being impacted by everything that's happening, or that they don't have somebody in their family who's been impacted by the virus. And so listening to how people are responding and listening to what they perk up at and what they kind of get quiet about, and paying attention to all of those cues in how they're responding, and by being present in the conversation and knowing whether you're influencing that with your own presence or not, I feel like is super important right now.
Yeah, and I agree that and then on the flip side of that too, it's like don't assume that someone can't, you know, in this particular scenario, I could see someone saying, oh, well, there's all these things happening, people can't afford to donate, they're struggling. Not necessarily. It's not, even though it's affecting a lot of people, we don't want to make assumptions about what someone can or cannot afford to donate, right, in this scenario.
Absolutely.
Because if anything, I'm hearing of more people I mean, yes, there's challenges, but I've also heard of people saying, oh, I donated here, I donated there, I've never donated to this organization before, but I did. Who can I donate to because I have enough and I have an extra? And so I'm seeing, and I'm sure you're seeing that as well, you know, people really pouring their hearts out and helping their community. So we don't want to also discount, right to your point of being aware of, like, what are my assumptions? What do I think is happening? How am I mind reading in a situation that maybe I think something's true, but it's not actually true because I don't know. So being really clear, like what you said, coming to that conversation clear and listening and aware and curious and just open, I think is your point, really excellent.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, like, we can't have those assumptions right now. I think a lot of what we do, especially if you're in the communication side of the organization or the donor relations side, we do have to make assumptions based on data and information and historical patterns, but now is not the time for that, because most of our assumptions are completely inaccurate. So it is important that we're remembering, and I think, again, this is part of that mindset shift we talked about earlier of, we're not coming to you and asking you for money because we're desperate. We're coming to you and asking you for money because you might have money and you might have no other way to give back and work against this virus right now, but we have an opportunity for you to help combat the effects of this situation. And that might be just the empowering thing that you need this week because you're really struggling with feeling helpless right now. Or it might be, you need a task to do at home. We've had 2 weeks ago, we started recruiting volunteers for something we've never done before, which is utilizing them to make calls to our residents with us. And we had 80 people sign up in less than 2 weeks, and only 2 of them had ever worked with our organization before this.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah,
and that's so inspiring.
Yeah, and it's honestly, It's probably the best motivation for us because we get to see how people are showing up for their own communities right now. But it's also a really strong reminder. We were nervous to ask because people have enough stress in their own lives trying to learn to be homeschool parents and trying to learn to get along with their spouse 24/7. And there's a lot of stressors. So it was a good reminder that people are also looking for ways to give back. And as nonprofits, we have that available to them usually. We just need to open up and be willing to make that conversation available to them.
And I think that's exciting too. And I've had different conversations throughout the week about this where, yes, there's a lot of challenges that we're dealing with, and those challenges can invite incredible innovation because now we're like, okay, well, if we can't do what we normally have done, how can we still make an impact? And it sounds like that you guys pivoted really quickly, and then you're able to impact even more people that you didn't even occur to you to like, oh, well, I guess we could have people call people like, oh, what? Like we could do that? Yeah. And that people would want to. And sure, we're in an area where, in Orange County, California, where, there's millions and millions of people. So not everybody has little kids at home who are trying to homeschool. Like some people are retired. Some people aren't working but want to give back, but maybe they can't give back financially, but they want to give back through their time. So there's all these different kinds of scenarios. And it sounds like you guys just picked up the ball and ran with it, that's such a huge success. Oh, and I was going to point out too, I'm imagining that there's a place on your website, project-access.org, that people could go to and donate or sign up to volunteer. Would that be an accurate assumption?
Thank you. Yes, it's a very accurate assumption. There's actually another resource on there too that I want to share while we have the airtime. We built a page to really serve the needs of our residents, but we found that it's been helpful for a lot of people, including some of our donors' families and other individuals. So if you go to project-access.org/residents, there's a resource library there, and it includes information about where to get good educational content for your kids if you don't want to spend all day with them. And where to get information if you have been laid off or you've lost hours in your work, and information about the CARES Act and information about COVID as it's changing in we serve 13 states. So there's information by state about what you can apply for support, where food banks are located, things like that. So
that's incredible.
Everybody.
Very, very helpful. Very helpful. And so if you're, someone who's watching this and someone who could use those services, please send them over there so that they can get those resources right away. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then if you want to volunteer or donate, you can do that there too.
Yeah.
And actually, I feel like we practiced this, but we didn't. But what you just said actually leads me into the last thing that I wanted to talk about. My third tip is that for nonprofits, we have to be really careful right now that as we pivot and adjust to meet the needs of our clients, that we avoid mission creep. So I think we're all learning that as we interact with our constituents and the people who need us, the way that we deliver our services has to change. And thank you for saying that we did this quickly. We've tried very hard. We've been hustling to make it happen. Our model is built on bringing people together to really strengthen community and create social support for each other and teach in groups so that people are learning together and can rely on each other. And we've obviously had to shift that model. And in the process, we've noticed other areas of lack that we want to fulfill. But it's really, really important for nonprofits that we focus on the mission that we are committed to, because we made a legal commitment when we got our 501c3 designation to serve a specific mission. And we made a commitment to the donors who gave us money to uphold that mission that we're going to continue to deliver on that. So we have been really diligent about really tapping into all of the partnerships that we have in the community. So our residents, we focus on economic stability with them, and sometimes that includes us providing supplemental food to make sure that they have enough to feed their families and make ends meet, and that money can go to things like rent and utilities and education. So right now, we're seeing about 4 times as many families have a need for food, and we can't fulfill all of that on our own. But there are a lot of food bank community partners that we can tap into, and by reaching out to them, we've been able to build kind of our spider web network and utilize their resources. They can't deliver to us, but we can send volunteers to go pick up the food and bring it to our community, and then we can safely deliver it to the different units for our residents. So we're still providing access to food, even though that's not a primary part of our mission, but we're able to do that through partnerships instead of shifting a bunch of our operational resources and a bunch of our financial resources to fulfill that need. So I would just encourage you to continue to think about, as you adapt, are you adapting in ways that you'll be able to continue to apply after the COVID crisis is over,
Right.
and therefore planning strategically, or are you just just reacting to what the crisis needs are? And then you're going to find yourself in a troubling situation at the end of this when you have funders to respond to report back on the impact that you created, and it doesn't necessarily align with what they planned to fund, or B, you find yourself off mission at the end of this and needing to pivot back, and you don't want to leave anybody hanging when you've started to fulfill a need that you won't be able to continue. So
So
one
it's
of the
kind of
things
like
that,
when you were saying, because you just said a lot of really great stuff. So, and just to clarify, the phrase was mission creep, like meaning like you're kind of creeping off the edge. So I think the opposite is like stay in your lane, basically like stay in your lane or maintain your lane, still be adaptable, but don't get so far off the highway that you realize, oh no, we're lost and we can't get our way back,
yeah,
or get on the access road that's parallel, but don't just go too many streets over, like to
exactly.
really get back on that freeway, using that metaphor.
Exactly. And I
Sorry, you
think
were gonna say something else.
the one little piece that I'll add to that too is that this is really an opportunity to hone in on what you're really good at and find a way to deliver it that will be sustainable. One of the things that we've always done really well is outreach within the communities that we serve, but part of that includes us knocking on their doors every month. And we can't do that right now, which means we've had
Right.
to find alternative ways to reach out and do wellness checks and find out if their needs are met. And do you have a laptop if your school district didn't give you one so your kids can do their homework? So that's where those volunteers, those 80 volunteers that have joined us, come in, and they're helping us make those calls. But that doesn't have to stop after this pandemic is over. If any of them are interested in sticking around and continuing to serve, we can utilize that as a way to expand our outreach capabilities and then take our staff time and shift it to more, program quality or increasing the amount of one-on-one time they have with residents. So where some of our shifts are allowing us all to get better at delivering on our mission, and some of our shifts are going to really require us to focus on building partnerships. But both of those things are valuable to all of us in the long run because we all serve the community better when we work together. So it's a really good
Absolutely.
opportunity.
That's incredible. I think this is going to be really helpful for people in that nonprofit space. I know there's I've spoken at different food banks throughout Orange County and vendors of those food banks and things like that, and the staff. And there's so many nonprofits here in our local community. And then of course on LinkedIn, there's thousands and probably millions of nonprofits. So I think what you're sharing is really, really helpful. And I'm just so glad that you joined Conscious Leadership Circle so that you and I could connect. I mean, just selfishly, I'm like, yay, because I think you're amazing. And I'm just glad that we were able to connect on this too, so that you could share your brilliance.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much.
you're welcome. You're welcome. All right. Well, we just got to hear some great, amazing tips from Jamie now of Project Access. And stay tuned for our next episode where we'll interview another amazing expert. Meanwhile, do something good for yourself and for somebody else. See you later.